The Quiet Refusal, an Arch and Owl manifesto. There is a sickness going around, and almost no one is calling it by its name. It isn't a virus. It's a mood that's been sold to us so steadily, from so many directions, that we've started to mistake it for wisdom. The mood says, it's over. Nothing you do matters. The game is rigged. The future is decided, and you are a small and powerless thing inside a machine you can't affect. It arrives as news, as science, as sophistication, as realism. It is none of those things. It is demoralization, and it is being manufactured. I learned to see it the hard way. I am a man in recovery. I know what it is to reach the bottom of a thing, to lose the plot of my own life, and to claw back up. And here is what almost no one tells you about that climb. Getting sober, getting clean, getting through the crisis. That's not the hard part. The hard part comes after, when the structure falls away and the noise comes back in. When you are standing in the quiet you fought so hard to reach, and the whole world starts whispering that the quiet was pointless, that you can't change, that nothing can. That's the moment people give up, not at the bottom, but on the long climb back, when the demoralization finds them unequipped. I built Arch and Owl for that moment, and the more I looked at it, the more I realized the recovering addict isn't a special case. He's just the first to feel it, because he's the one who can't afford it. Everyone has the leak. He's simply the one for whom the leak is fatal. The same despair that pulls a person back toward the bottle is pulling whole nations toward the couch, the screen, the slow surrender. The addict is the canary. The rest of us are in the same mine. So let me name the two pumps that are draining the hope out of people. The first leak, the fear machine. Turn on anything. You will be told within minutes that something is out to get you. The other side, the economy, the climate, the technology, the virus, the collapse. And here is the cruel part, the part that makes it so hard to talk anyone out of. They're not entirely wrong. Things really are engineered to manipulate them. The feeds really are designed to enrage. The fear really is being farmed, because fear keeps you watching, and watching is the product. So when a frightened person tells me the world is rigged to keep them anxious and small, I don't tell them they're paranoid. I tell them they're half right, and that the half they're missing is the half that saves them. Yes, you are being played. No, that does not mean you are powerless. The machine needs you to believe those two things are the same. They are not. And notice who runs the machine. Left, right, center. Every faction that profits from your despair has the same single goal underneath the slogans, and it is not your flourishing. It is staying in power, holding your attention, keeping you afraid enough to obey and tired enough not to build. I am not here to hand you a team. The team is the trap. The moment you pick a side in their fight, you've agreed to live inside their noise. And we know it's a trap because it's been tested. In 1954, a researcher named Sherif took 22 perfectly ordinary 11-year-old boys to a summer camp at a place called Robber's Cave. They were strangers, well-adjusted, nothing unusual about any of them. He split them at random into two groups. They named themselves the Rattlers and the Eagles, and within days of being set against each other, these good kids were raiding each other's cabins, stealing, name-calling, coming to blows the adults had to break up. Nothing real divided them. A coin flip had made them enemies. And here's the detail almost everyone forgets. There was a third group at that camp. The researchers, the hidden hand that drew the line, staged the competition and stayed off to the side so the boys would believe the hatred was their own. The Rattlers thought they hated the Eagles. They'd been set up to by someone who profited from the conflict and made sure to stay invisible. If you want a picture of the fear machine, that's it. Painted in 1954. It gets starker. A decade later, the psychologist Henri Tajfel tried to find the minimum it takes to turn people against each other, and the answer was almost nothing at all. He sorted boys into groups based on something as meaningless as which abstract painter they said they preferred, and that was enough. With no competition, no history, No reason. They began favoring their own group and shorting the other. They would even choose to give their own side less, in absolute terms, if it meant widening the gap over the others. People will pay a personal price just to beat a team they were assigned to 5 minutes ago by a stranger. That is what's being done to you, at scale, every day. A line gets drawn, and the line can be anything. It doesn't even have to be real. And suddenly the people on the other side aren't fellow human beings in the same sinking mine. They're the enemy, and you'll burn your own house down to spite them. The machine loves this. Divided people are frightened people, and frightened people are obedient and easy to sell to. I am not here to win you over to the rattlers or the eagles. I am here to point at the adults who drew the line. The second leak, the sophisticated despair. The first leak is loud and obvious. The second one is quiet, and it wears a lab coat. Go to the biggest platforms in the world, the flagship podcasts, the most watched channels, the experts with the most followers, and listen to what gets presented as settled science to millions of vulnerable people. You have no free will. Your choices are an illusion your brain invents after the fact. Consciousness is just computation. You're a meat robot. Reality is probably a simulation. None of this is even real. The self is a story. There's no one home. These are presented as facts. They are not facts. They are positions, contested, unproven, and in several cases quietly abandoned by the very people who first proposed them. But a frightened, tired person doesn't hear contested philosophical position. They hear the conclusion, and the conclusion is always the same, so none of it matters. So why fight? For a person at day 90 of their sobriety, white-knuckling through the silence, that podcast isn't an interesting thought experiment. It's a permission slip to relapse. If I'm a deterministic machine in a fake universe with no real choices, what exactly am I staying sober for? This is what the first 2 volumes of my work exist to answer. Not as a metaphysics lecture, as a defense of the ground a person stands on to fight for their life. Reality is real. You are real. Your choices are real. The world was built to be met by you, not drifted through by a ghost, against an authority figure on a screen telling a fragile person they're an illusion. That isn't philosophy. It's a hand reaching back down the cliff. The tell, they can't even agree on how it ends. Here is the thing that finally broke the spell for me, and I offer it to you as the simplest tool in this whole book. Listen to the prophets of doom long enough, and you'll notice they can't keep their story straight. The same voices, sometimes in the same hour, will tell you that artificial intelligence is going to take every job by next year, and that a solar flare is going to fry the grid and end civilization, and that the climate gives us a decade, and that you never had free will to begin with, and that reality is a simulation that could switch off at any time. Well, which is it? It can't be all of them. The robot apocalypse and the solar apocalypse and the simulation shutdown are mutually exclusive. If they were actually reporting facts, the facts would have to agree. They don't agree on anything. Except the ending. Every single one of these stories, whatever its plot, delivers the exact same final line. So stop trying. Nothing you do matters. When 100 contradictory stories all arrive at the identical conclusion, you are not looking at analysis. You are looking at a product. The despair was the thing being sold. The apocalypse was just this week's packaging. Once you see that, you can't unsee it, and the spell loses its grip. Not because the future is guaranteed to be fine. I'm not promising you that, but because you've caught the salesman. And a salesman you've caught can't frighten you the same way again. An older, truer story. None of this is new, and I take some comfort in that. Almost 2 centuries ago in this country, a handful of thinkers stood in front of their own version of this machine. The cold, mechanical fatalism of their age. The doctrine that the universe was a dead clock and the human being a helpless gear. Emerson, Thoreau, and the others answered it with something that still holds, that the individual is not a cog, but a source, that nature is not a meat grinder of pure competition, but a vast cooperation, and modern biology has only proven them more right, not less. The forest is a network, not a battlefield. The cell itself is a partnership. The story that everything is locked in a war of all against all was always a half-truth, told on purpose by people who profited from our believing it. And remember those boys at Robber's Cave, the ones a coin flip turned into enemies? There's a part of that story I held back because it belongs here. When the researchers finally wanted to undo the hatred they'd manufactured, they found that simply bringing the two sides together, sharing meals, watching a movie, even setting off fireworks on the 4th of July, did nothing. Pleasant contact across the line didn't fix it. What fixed it was giving them a problem bigger than the line. The camp's water supply broke, a truck got stuck with everyone's food on it, and suddenly solving it required both groups pulling together, because neither could do it alone. Working a shared problem that mattered more than the teams, the boys quietly became one people again. Sherif called these superordinate goals, and they turned out to be the only thing that worked. I think that's the whole answer. Hidden in a children's summer camp, you do not heal a divided people by being nice across the divide. You heal them by handing them something worth building that's bigger than the divide. That's what this is. The shared problem under all the manufactured ones. Reclaiming hope, reclaiming agency, reclaiming a life worth getting up for is bigger than any team, and it can only be solved together. So I'm not inventing anything here. I'm picking up a thread that runs back a long way. The quiet, stubborn refusal to be demoralized on command. The insistence that hope is not naive, and agency is not an illusion, and your life is not a foregone conclusion. What Arch and Owl actually is. Strip away the volumes and the frameworks, and here is the whole of it. There are forces, some cynical, and some merely confused, draining the hope and the sense of agency out of ordinary people. I have felt that drain at its most extreme, at the bottom of addiction, where the loss of hope is not metaphorical, but lethal, and I found a way back up. This is the record of how. It is the proving ground for a simple, dangerous idea that you can refuse, that you can step out of the fear machine, see through the sophisticated despair, catch the contradiction, and stand on ground that is actually real. I am not going to describe the water to a drowning person. You're smart. You've been lied to by smart people for years, and some part of you already knows it. I'm just going to point from the shore and tell you the truth as I lived it. You are not powerless. You are not an illusion. It is not over. Come in. Let's build something that holds. Wayne,